Welcome to the Sangamon Experience. My name is Ann Mosley. I'm the director and curator for the Sangamon Experience at the University of Illinois at Springfield. Today, I have the great pleasure to introduce to you a series of women who have made their mark here in Sangamon County, Illinois. And I'll be starting from the beginning of this month all the way to the end, discussing different women who have blazed a trail from as early as the Revolutionary War to today. And it's a great honor to talk about these women because a lot of times throughout history, they get kind of pushed aside and hidden from the historic record, and you have to really start digging. And a lot of the women that lived here in Sangamon County did a lot of things that were considered normal at the time, but today it seems like a great feat of achievement. So today, I'll be discussing some of the women who made their mark by exploring the prairie and also fighting for freedom as well. So today, I'll be talking to you about a woman by the name of Luna McDaniel, and that's spelled L-U-A-N-N. So Loon. And sorry if I mispronounce it. I'm still trying to figure out more about her. She's a very interesting woman who led a very adventurous life. She came here to this new America at the time, and she ended up getting married over in Virginia, and she married a man by the name of Robert McDaniel. And during the winter of 1777, she became an army nurse for the Patriots. And she was able to live and go from camp to camp, following her husband while actually mending the men along the way. So she was a part of the birth of our nation. And a lot of these women who were serving as nurses were wives, sisters, daughters, women who wanted to be near their loved ones and wanted to care and do their part to make sure that this country becomes a free and independent country. So she served in a very well-known battle that many of us will be familiar with if we've studied the Revolutionary War. She was a nurse at Valley Forge during the winter of 1777 to 78. Her husband, Robert, was a member of the 5th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment. And he spent 3.5 years in the Continental Army and reportedly was present when Lord Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown. So if you're familiar with the Hamilton musical and they sing about the Battle of Yorktown, Robert was actually there with his wife, who was there mending the sick and wounded. Now, images that we see of women during the Revolutionary War are mostly shown through artwork. And one artwork you can find in the Library of Congress describing these heroic women who served as nurses was the Molly Pitcher heroine of the Revolutionary War images. The image of women who are standing near the guns and thrusting their fists forward and fighting for the cause of freedom. And these are just some depictions on what these courageous women did. And even though in her earlier life she did not live here in Illinois, it shows the strength, the ambition, and the courage that she had to not only serve as a nurse, but how that continued throughout her life. Now, McDaniel was living in Pennsylvania, and her husband, Robert, ended up passing away in Pennsylvania, and he's buried there. But at the age of 75, she ends up moving out to Illinois and settles near the Mechanicsburg area, which is near Riverton and Rochester, so kind of in between. It's right outside of Springfield. And she settles there with her son, her youngest son, who's also named Robert. And she lived with him. And just if you're interested in knowing, if you look on Find a Grave, which I ended up using as part of my research to find out more about her family, I found out that she was born in October of 1759. Her husband, Robert, was, of course, buried in Pennsylvania, but they had 5 children. And Robert was the youngest of all of them. So she had a son named Henry, another James, William, Jonathan, Robert, and then their only daughter, Sarah. Now, most of these children did not survive to adulthood. A lot of them died quite young, and that was quite common at the time. But for a woman of her age, 75 years of age, moving from Pennsylvania, where she has lived majority of her life, and moving out to the prairie state, which, I mean, she was here during the earlier stages of Illinois' statehood, and living with her son. Illinois is still developing at this time, and in the 1850s, we see her passing away. And this is where we find out the most about her. Now, if you are interested in the Daughters of the American Revolution, or the DAR, you will be able to find more information on these types of ancestors that moved out here to Illinois who fought in the Revolutionary War. And that's where we'll find most of their records. And as I was digging for McDaniel in a lot of these research materials, you don't really find them in the Illinois State Archives because that's still a bit early, and also it's prior to statehood, and so the records are kind of scarce in regards to their location here in the state. But if you go to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, you'll be able to look at Ancestry.com, MyHeritage. They also have Family Search as well. And they don't have a genealogical librarian at the moment. I hope they end up getting one soon, because they are a wealth of resource in regards to discovering the lives of individuals who lived here in central Illinois. So I was very fortunate to be able to use Ancestry to find some records on Miss Lynn McDaniel. And I ended up finding where her son was eventually born. I also ended up finding her actual record number, which helps quite a bit, because if you find the record number of an ancestor, you're able to find all the research that was done prior to certain resources of family histories that have been put together based on Revolutionary War ancestors. So in looking at her obituary, and also looking at the census records and the Daughters of the American Revolution family history records, I was able to find only a little bit. There are no documentations of letters or correspondence between her husband and her children. But one other thing I was able to find about her was the fact that if you go to the Mechanicsburg Cemetery, there is you can find her tombstone, which you can find information about her. This is another image of Molly Pitcher. So you'll be able to find on Sangamon Link, which is where I found out Lunan's name, but also they had an image of her gravestone. And if you go out to the Mechanicsburg Cemetery today, you will see a plaque that is honoring those who fought in the Revolutionary War that are buried in Sangamon County. Now, if you look at the listing, you will be able to see that there are about 54 Revolutionary War veterans buried in the Mechanicsburg Cemetery. And there's a gentleman by the name of Carl Reed who in 2010 did a study for the Springfield chapter Sons of the American Revolution. And he was able to come up with this specific number of about 54 veterans. And that's something you'll be able to find within the Sangamon Link record. But you'll also be able to read about Jacqueline and Harold Wright's work on the American Revolutionary veterans that were buried in Sangamon County. Jacqueline and Harold Wright wrote that I discovered they had already spent nearly 25 years collecting the very information I was looking to include. The Wrights had visited all of the Patriot graves in Sangamon County they could find and had taken pictures of the tombstones and grave markers. In addition, they had attended many grave dedications over the years and again taken pictures and saved programs. Jackie had also researched the State Journal Register newspaper and its predecessor, so the Register and the Journal, files and copied articles about long ago grave dedications. Jackie had also spent countless hours researching history books about Sangamon County and included that information. The Wrights had collected 3 4-inch binders of material relating to the Patriots buried in Sangamon County. So Carl Reed did an extensive amount of research on what the Wrights have done, but then also what he was able to add to it. And Lunan was a part of his research and finding not just the men, but also the women who contributed to the cause of forming this country. Now, as you look more in at the cemetery and you find all of the graves dedicated to Revolutionary War veterans, you will also find a sign. So most dedications include a marker, and this marker is placed at the Mechanicsburg Cemetery, and it gives a listing of some of the individuals buried specifically in Mechanicsburg, and you'll see them listed here. It's kind of hard to see, mostly because the plaque itself has been here over time, and so it has picked up a lot of damage due to the weather and its surroundings. It's made out of copper, and as you go up to the sign, you're able to read the names. Now, as you look through the names of individuals, you will see here that she is not listed, which is interesting. So how did we come to find out that she was a nurse during the Revolutionary War? Well, a fun story comes into that. You see, through family histories, through stories that have been passed down from one generation to the next, the story was told of Robert and Luann McDaniel's fight for freedom during the Revolutionary War. And it was passed down from son to daughter to son and so forth, until eventually it caught the eye of the Sangamon County Historical Society and the editor of the Sangamon Link, which led to the article being written. Now, if you read closely at the plaque, it says, quote, "During the Revolutionary War, many soldiers were accompanied by their wives, daughters, or mothers. In the same cases, these women were pressed into service as laundresses or cooks. Nursing in the military was traditionally done by male soldiers. The shortage of manpower prompted General George Washington to provide female nurses to attend the sick. Every woman nursing meant one more man freed for fighting on the line. The women who accompanied these men and women residing near the scene of battle were among those pressed into service as nurses." This tells their specific story. But what makes it complicated is there is not a lot of primary source material to back it up. The sign here at the cemetery was dedicated in 1911 and was rededicated in 1914. Now, as you look at the sign, it focuses mostly on the men that served and don't have a listing of the women. In Carl Reed's study with the listing of Revolutionary War veterans buried in Sangamon County, he reported that there was no specific records in the Valley Forge Historical Society of Luna McDaniel or nurses who served there. But he cites other histories that note the informal nursing services provided by women of the area. Now, in the Illinois story, it's interesting to see the large number of Revolutionary War veterans buried here. I know in doing research on McDaniel, I was kind of curious on, well, do I have any ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War buried here? And it so happens that Old Cumberland Cemetery near Pawnee has a special section for Revolutionary War veterans, and that's where I found one of my ancestors, John Lockridge. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, well, in the midst of my family research, my family has always lived here in Illinois, and I'm not sure if they actually fought in the Revolutionary War. Well, I would take another look because there is a strong possibility that you may be descended from revolutionaries from early in our nation's history who decided to take that great pension that they received serving in the Continental Army and use that to move out here to the Midwest to start their own farms, businesses, and to make a life for themselves and for their family. So I encourage you to do some more research and also ask your grandparents. If they're still around, ask them questions about family history. There may be a family story that you may not know about that they thought that, well, it's not really that important or no one's asked me about it, but it may be of interest to you. So I would recommend talking to family members, writing down those oral histories because you never know. Down the road, you may have a descendant who would find your story fascinating. And that's the case that we see here with the McDaniels. They lived a life here on the frontier, and before that, fought in a great war in Pennsylvania, and they were able to pass down their experience to their children, and then their grandchildren and their children. And it showcases the power of family legacies, but also the power of ambition, perseverance, and the struggle to maintain freedom, but also to branch out and become a part of the great American story. So if you're interested in finding out more about the Revolutionary War veterans or the nurses that helped the wounded, or any other stories related to the Revolutionary story here in Illinois, I encourage you to go to Sangamon Link and take a look at the rosters of Revolutionary War veterans that are buried here in Sangamon County, but also take a trip out to the cemetery. There's not very many people that visit cemeteries nowadays. It used to be a long pastime. But you'll find a lot of grave markers that are in need of cleaning and repair. But you'll also find that the people who are buried there have some very interesting stories to tell. And you can't discover those unless you find out their names and where they're at. So then you can come back and do more research on them and help uncover the stories that they have. Now, I also want to take some time here to let you all know that I'll be talking more about women who have come here to Illinois and settled, such as the pioneer woman, which I will be talking about next week on our Trailblazing Women. Now, as I tell you these stories, there are stories that have been recorded by individuals through memoirs, and they've also been recorded in primary source materials through letters, through diaries, and newspapers. And there are so many stories out there to find and dig for. And we have a new exhibit that will be coming up at the end of this month, so March 22nd. It's called Hometown Pride. And I am asking the community to find those family stories, find what you love about your town, your community. It may be here in Springfield, or it might be in Mechanicsburg, Riverton, Rochester, Auburn, Pleasant Plains, New Berlin. I could go down the long list of amazing communities here in Sangamon County. And I want this exhibit to be one created by our communities, by the people who live here, who have heard the stories and who have made sure that they are preserved and passed down from one person to the next. And I want you to email us at Sangamon Experience at uis.edu. And I encourage you to reach out to us with your hometown pride story. March 22nd is when this exhibit will open. If you think that's cutting it way too close to turn your story in, it's not, because we will be posting new items for the exhibit every month. So every month on either the 20th or the 22nd, we will be uploading more items to include in this community-driven exhibit. And within this, you'll be able to tell your story. For example, it might be a favorite memory from eating at Maid-Rite, which is America's first drive-through that is here in Springfield. Or maybe it's a little bit more adventurous by going to the mansion in Riverton in 1990 to attend a Cheap Thrills concert. There are stories here in Sangamon County that extend from Abraham Lincoln as the rail splitter candidate all the way to a local football player ending up owning the Chicago Bears. So every story here in Sangamon County has a legacy to leave behind, but also, who knows, there may be other people out there that have had the same experience that you have had. And it's a way for us to connect as communities and connect as Illinois citizens. So I encourage you to email us about your experience here in Sangamon County. That way, the story is told and we're able to unite around each other. So stay tuned for more trailblazing stories about women this month. If you have a story to send to the Sangamon Experience, I encourage you to send it to sangamonexperience@uis.edu. And tune in next week when I talk about the pioneer woman of Sangamon County. All right, see you later.